Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ADSR This series of videos will cover all of the features in Kontakt. We'll continue with the editors. The script editor. Kontakt includes a powerful and flexible scripting language processor, which lets third-party developers and users come up with custom and complex ways to interact with instruments and multis. Kontakt's scripting language is easy to learn for anyone who knows a programming language, but a thorough review would go beyond the scope of this tutorial, so we'll have to cover it in depth at a later time. Today we'll go over the basics of loading and using scripts in the script editor. Scripts in Kontakt work like small programs that hook into Kontakt's way of processing notes, controller data, and user actions, enabling them to change instrument parameters and MIDI data in a pragmatic way. Loading, editing, and managing scripts takes place in one of Kontakt's scripts editors. You can access the global editor, which contains scripts that affect the multi, by clicking on the multi-script button on the right side of the instrument rack header. To open the local editor of an instrument, click the script editor button below its header when the rack is in edit mode. The script editors on the multi and instrument levels are identical. At the top of the editor are 5 tabs, each with an empty label. These slots take up a script each, and if a script changes any events, the script in a slot to its right will see the modified events. So basically, they flow from left to right. Below the slots is an empty space where scripts can provide a user interface, which will appear here. To load a script, click the Preset button. A drop-down menu will appear, allowing you to select an item from the Kontakt Preset Scripts folder, or from the User folder. After you've selected a script, its user interface controls will appear in the space below the tabs. Most scripts work right away after loading, others might need you to require user input. To bypass a script and temporarily deactivate it, click on the bypass button in the upper left corner of the script editor. Whenever you use a script that has its own controls, you can automate these like any other controls of the Kontakt user interface. Select the Auto tab in the browser and drag either a MIDI controller or host controller ID onto the knob whose parameter you would like to automate. When you're done making changes to your script, you can save it by clicking the Preset button and selecting Save Preset. A dialog will appear asking you to enter a new file name for the script. If you've loaded a factory preset, don't overwrite the original. Save it as a new script. If you don't save your script, don't worry. Scripts will be automatically saved with your sequencer session or with your multi. You can browse and edit the source code of a script via the built-in code editor. Click the Edit button in the lower left corner of the script editor to open a text editor pane below the script's user interface. In this editor, you can make changes to the current script or write your own script from scratch. When you finish with your changes, they won't affect the running script immediately. Instead, the change indicator in the upper right corner of the source code editor will light up to remind you that you'll have to commit the changes first. To do this, click the Apply button. If the script interpreter does not find any errors in your script, your changes will be made active. If there is an error, it will show up in the status bar and also highlight the code in red. You will still need to save your script to make the changes permanent. To protect the source code of your script and keep others from browsing and making changes, you can lock it with a password while the source code editor is visible. To do this, click the Lock with Password button in the upper left corner of the source editor. Enter a password twice and click OK. Other people can still use the script, but the source editor won't show up if they don't have the password. The title for the script field allows you to enter a name for the script. The name will appear on the script tab when loaded. Keep in mind, the file name of the script on disk can be a different name. Apply From is the drop-down menu that allows you to set where the source of the editor will come from. Next to it is a label that displays the currently selected Apply From source. Editor Patch will set the contents to the currently selected editor. In other words, if you make changes in the editor, switch to a different source, switching back to the editor will populate the editor with the original changes. Clipboard. This will paste the contents of the clipboard into the editor. When you use Clipboard, the editor will be in read-write mode. User. This will set the contents of the editor to a saved user script. The editor will be in read-only mode. To edit the script, select All, Copy, switch back to the editor patch, and paste. Factory will set the contents of the editor to a saved factory script. The editor will be read-only. To edit the script, select All, Copy, switch back to Editor Patch, and paste. You can also access the shortcut menu by right-clicking in the editor. The functions available are Cut, Copy, Paste, and Select All, which are all self-explanatory. Also, you can turn any panel of an instrument script into a performance view, making it visible and accessible from within the rack by simply adding the statement Make Perf View in a new line somewhere between the lines On Init and the following End On, which can usually be found at the top of scripts. After you click the Apply button and return to the multi-instrument view, the script controls you define in the script will appear below the instrument header in the rack. The source module. The source module marks the start of Kontakt signal flow and is the source of all audio. It provides access to the playback engine and can't be removed from the instrument. It has 9 playback modes optimized for handling different audio material. Sampler is the traditional sample playback engine that keeps all sampled data in RAM. DFD is a high-performance solution for streaming samples from disk in real time. Tone Machine can change the pitch and formants of sounds independently from the playback speed. Time Machine and Time Machine 2 are playback modes that allow you to compress and stretch samples in real time without affecting pitch. Time Machine Pro is just a high-quality version of Time Machine. Beat Machine handles rhythmic samples such as drum loops that have been sliced, making them fit your song tempo. S1200 Machine is an emulation of an EMU SP1200. An MP60 Machine is an emulation of an Akai MPC60. The mode is switched via the drop-down menu in the upper left corner of the source module's control panel. Here's a look at each of the playback modes. Sampler. A traditional digital sampler that stores sample data in RAM. It reads from RAM and applies transposition by resampling the audio in real time. For the controls, you have tune, which changes the playback pitch one octave up or down. Changes to the pitch will affect playback tempo. To adjust these independently of each other, use Tone Machine or Time Machine. This control works in semitones, but finer adjustments can be made by holding Shift while moving the knob. Reverse. This plays all samples in a group in reverse. Playback will start at the end of the marker of a zone. When tracking is enabled, the pitch of the sample playback will be transposed along with the key position. MIDI. This sets the MIDI port and channel the group will respond to. Use this if you want different groups to respond to different MIDI channels. Otherwise, leave the setting at default to use the instrument's value. Release trigger. When activated, samples in the group will be triggered when MIDI note off is received. T is only visible if release trigger is activated. When set to a value other than 0, Kontakt will count from that value backwards in millisecond intervals when it receives a note, then stop the timer and provides its current value as a modulation source when it receives a corresponding note off value. Note mono. Only visible if the release trigger is activated. This button affects how release samples will respond to note repetitions. Playing a note repeatedly will cut off any previous samples that are still sounding so that only one release sample will play at a time. High quality interpolation. This drop-down menu allows you to choose from a list of 3 sampling algorithms of various quality. Samples played at a different note other than the root key will need to be resampled. Standard uses the algorithm of previous Kontakt versions, which offers good resampling but light on CPU. The high and perfect settings use high-quality algorithms, which eliminates audible artifacts, but need more CPU. More CPU resources are used the further they need to transpose a sample from its root key. DFD. This uses an advanced streaming engine, which allows you to play very large samples in real time without having to load all sample data in RAM. DFD only loads the beginning of samples. The controls for the source module's DFD are identical to those of the standard sampler mode. Here are some things to keep in mind when using DFD. When using DFD, the maximum number of voices will be lower than sampler because latency and throughput of your hard disk will be the bottleneck. Overall voice count can be optimized by putting only groups and instruments that access very large samples into DFD mode, keeping all others in sampler mode. Don't try to use samples on a CD-ROM. Copy them to hard disk first. DFD mode minimizes RAM usage but has a memory footprint. You can switch between DFD and sampler mode anytime, but there might be a slight pause as the entire sample set needs to be loaded into RAM when switching. Tone Machine lets you change pitches and format frequencies independently from playback speed. It does this by processing your audio with granular synthesis algorithms and is important in creative sound design. When you switch from sampler or DFD to Tone Machine, Kontakt analyzes your samples first, which can take a long time if you have lots of samples in the group. A progress bar will indicate the current status of this analysis. Keep in mind that Tone Machine handles your audio in small chunks of sample values called grains. Sample loop regions are aligned to these chunks, so playback of loops may be slightly inaccurate. Tone Machine controls. Tune changes playback pitch within 1 octave up or down without affecting the playback speed. Smooth adjusts the shape of the grain crossfades, which reduces artifacts during playback. Higher values create a smoother pitch shift, but rhythmic material may lose definition and punch. Lower values are prone to cause a buzzing sound, but will keep transients intact. Speed changes playback speed independently of pitch. The value is displayed as a percentage of the original speed by default, so 200 doubles the playback speed and 50 halves it. The control goes all the way down to 0, which freezes the sound at its current playback position. It can also be synchronized to your host or master editor tempo. In this mode, samples will be stretched to match the length of your note value. To do this, click the displayed unit of speed control and select the note value from the drop-down menu. Change the numerator with the speed knob. To switch back to unsynchronized mode, just choose the default entry from the drop-down menu. Formant shifts the formant frequencies independently of pitch. Formant frequencies are parts of the signal's frequency content that decide its predominant timbral characteristics. DC filter enables a filter that eliminates DC bias and recenters your waveform around its origin. DC bias reduces headroom and causes distortion. It is highly recommended to leave this enabled. Legato allows you to play multiple notes in legato. When enabled, Kontakt will carry its current playback position over to each following note rather than playing each sample from beginning. Tracking, MIDI channel, and release trigger is the same as in sampler mode. Time Machine. Time Machine uses granular synthesis to render pitch and playback speed of your samples independently of each other. It is optimized to alter the playback speed but leave pitch unaffected. This allows real-time time stretching. The controls are the same as Tone Machine, but offer the following additional. High Quality replaces the DC filter button of the Tone Machine. When enabled, Time Machine will analyze the sample data to determine the optimal grain boundaries. Disabling this will make the granular synthesizer work the same regardless of source material. This especially affects playback quality at low speeds. It is recommended to leave high quality disabled during production and enabling it during mixing or mastering. If you have a high-powered computer, you'll be fine leaving this enabled all the time. Grain replaces the formant control. It determines the grain size of the granular synthesis. Since the grain size is not static in high quality mode, this control has little effect when you have high quality enabled. Time Machine 2. This works the same as Time Machine but uses enhanced algorithms that provide better quality time stretching and pitch shifting. The controls are mostly identical to Time Machine with the following additions. Transient Copy. Transient Copy will preserve transients as accurately as possible. When working with drum loops or percussive material, it's recommended to enable this mode. Transient Size. This adjusts the duration of the transients that will be left untouched when Transient Copy is enabled. Grain Size. This allows you to choose from several grain sizes that are optimized for various types of source material. Time Machine Pro. This mode should be used for the highest quality independent pitch shifting and time stretching. This requires very high CPU and RAM usage, so only use this mode if your system can handle it. In my opinion, the sound quality is vastly better than Time Machine 2 and should be used whenever possible. If your system is struggling with TM Pro, use TM2 during production and switch to TM Pro during mixdown. The controls are the same as Time Machine with the following exceptions. Reverse. This behaves exactly the same as reverse in sampler mode. High quality mode. This switches between efficient and pro mode. When you switch to pro mode, advanced controls are displayed. Keep formants will preserve formants while pitch shifting for a more natural pitch shift. Envelope order sets the order of the spectral envelope estimation. The default is set to 128, which works fine for most material. If the sample is high pitch, the order should be lowered. If the sample is low pitch, the value should be raised. Formant shift sets the spectral envelope shift factor. The default is set to 100%, which works fine for most material. This spectral shift is performed before any pitch shifting occurs. Because no two source material is the same, you'll have to play around with these settings to find something that sounds good to you. Beat machine. Beat machine mode is for tempo synchronized playback of slice samples. It allows you to change the playback speed of percussive audio, such as drum loops, without slurring transients or introducing artifacts common to other time stretching methods. Slicing requires you to add markers in the wave editor, which we previously covered. The controls of Beat Machine are MIDI channel, which is the same as described earlier, tune, which adjusts the pitch at which each slice will be played back within one octave up or down, speed, adjust the speed at which the slice pattern will be played back. When you use the Sync Slice tab of the wave editor, the readout of this control will display zone. If you've activated Beat Machine mode manually, the speed will be displayed as a percentage of the pattern's original speed and can be synchronized manually by clicking on the displayed unit, then choosing a note from the value drop-down menu. Tracking. When enabled, the playback pitch will depend on the notes that you play. When disabled, the pitch won't follow the keyboard. Slice attack. This adjusts the attack time of the crossfade envelopes. Slices are crossfaded to avoid clicks when played back. Large values can weaken transients, so it's best to adjust this to the lowest possible value that just avoids clicking. Slice release. This adjusts the release time of the crossfade that occurs between slices. Release trigger is the same as described earlier. Internal trigger was used with slices that have been automatically mapped into groups across the keyboard. This function is replicated with zones since the release of Kontakt 3. You only need this button if you are using instruments that have been saved in previous Kontakt versions. This button is only included for backwards compatibility. S1200 machine. The S1200 machine is a vintage machine mode that emulates the behavior of the EMU SP1200 drum sampler. It degrades the playback quality of the sample and changes the way Kontakt changes the pitch and basic handling of the sample playback engine. The controls are the same as sampler or DFD mode, but without a quality menu and the addition of a static filter menu. In the static filter menu, you can choose between no filter, filter high mid, filter low mid, or filter low. The MP60 machine. The MP60 machine is a vintage machine mode that emulates the behavior of the Akai MP60 drum sampler. It degrades the playback quality of the sample and changes the pitch and basic handling of the sample playback engine. It has a higher sample quality than the S1200 mode. The controls are the same as sampler or DFD mode, but without a quality menu. I absolutely love these vintage machine emulators, my favorite being the MP60. If you need a really dirty sound, I recommend using the S1200 and using one of the filters. The script processor is one of the most important features in Kontakt and makes Kontakt the most powerful sampler available. Although we've only covered the basics, expect to see plenty more tutorials in the future. We also looked at the source module, One thing to keep in mind is that the source module is at the group level. Each group has its own source module, and changes to the playback mode only affect zones in the group to which the respective module belongs. And don't forget to check out our website at www.contacttutorials.com for more tutorials on Kontakt. ADSR Kontakt Tutorials. Supercharge your Kontakt skills. This is DJ Nice signing off until next time. Now go make some music.